welcome to Right On, the podcast from Final Draft. This is the show where we talk about all things screenwriting. I'm your host, Phil Galasso. Today we have a special episode for you, hosted by Final Draft's Big Break Contest director, Kayla Guess. Kayla spoke with international speaker and career coach Carol Kirschner. They discussed the various mentorship and training programs that Carol has created and or is directing, how to get a support staff role in a writer's room, and how to avoid getting stuck in those roles by way of applying to fellowships. There's a lot of good info in there. Check it out.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. My name is Kayla Guess. I have a lot of titles at Final Draft, but we can best sum it up as brand and marketing manager. I run our podcast, produce our podcast rather. Our normal host is Phil Galasso, but I'm stepping in today to talk with the incredibly impressive Carol Kirschner. Carol is an international speaker and career coach. She also is the creator and director of Viacom CBS Diversity Writers Mentoring Program. She is also the director of the WGA Showrunners Training Program. She's also the director of Mentorship Matters Program. Carol, how do you have any time for sleep?
Who said I sleep? You know what? The truth is that when you do things you love, and if you're really organized, you find the way.
Yeah, you really do. You find the time, you fit it in, right?
You do.
So I want to jump into first, I want to talk about all the different programs that you're in just to kind of break it down.
Sure.
And I think people understand more of the why and the guru-esque, I just made that word up, where your specialty really is. The first thing I definitely want to talk about, because it's new to me, is the Mentorship Matters program. I co-signed that just in terms of the idea, but what is that? How does that work?
This is a program that was developed, that was the vision of a group of showrunners. And the whole premise of it is that it used to be that it was the old white guys network. You know what I mean? Where you played golf with people and they hired you and you knew everybody. It was all based on relationships. But BIPOC writers that don't have access to those relationships are really facing a roadblock. So the theory of this, the premise of this, is that we are creating authentic relationships through an intensive one-year mentoring program we pair a mentor who's a showrunner with a mentee who is an emerging writer of color. And they spend an intensive year together. The mentor works with them on developing a new piece of writing material and a sample, all the same thing. And they help them in their career. They advise them. They introduce them to their fellow showrunners. They introduce them to agents and managers. And we have monthly panels and master classes where we bring in high-level executives and agents and showrunners to talk about different parts of the business. And the goal is, at the end, that we have more writers of color in a writer's room. Now, that is the goal. There's no guarantee. You can never guarantee it, because your showrunner mentor may not have a show, but they'll introduce you to their colleagues that may have a show. And we feel like it will be a success if we get people into the room as writer's PA, showrunner's assistant, writer's assistant. And of course, we would love to see people staffed. That's the goal. But in this business, that is the hierarchy. And I think we're going to talk about that later. One way to get in is through that ladder of writer's PA, showrunner's assistant, writer's assistant, staff writer. And so the whole plan of it, the whole purpose of it, it's a one-year program, is to really create authentic relationships that are going to be career-long relationships for these emerging writers.
That is so important. I was just at an event yesterday and we were talking about the same thing about mentoring. It was with Women of Color Unite. We were talking about exclusion through familiarity. And that I think is, to help people understand better about like the gap between writers who are people of color, have disabilities, have that underrepresented status. They don't have those relationships, and the why is because it's familiarity, right? There's too much of people hanging out with the people they know and they
Right.
understand and they relate to, because we're looking at it on like a physical sense.
Right.
But if so when you how many mentors do you have signed up?
This is amazing. We started with 10. We now have, and the program launches in a week. We have 23 committed mentors who have signed up for this intensive 1 year, and they check in every month and more as they give notes. 23 mentors, 23 mentees. The mentors are all showrunners or executive producers. They're people in a position to hire or recommend people to be hired.
Got it. I love it. And how many mentees to mentor? Just the one?
It's
One
one.
person
It's
to
a
one?
definitely a one-on-one relationship because we want it to be an authentic, genuine, deep relationship.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's wonderful that you're doing that. I definitely want to learn more about that, but we have a lot to talk about today.
Sure, sure.
So, and then if you could just like talk about, your involvement in the Viacom CBS Diversity Writers Program, mentoring program. What does your role look like there? Are you the one mentoring? Are you reading the material?
Well, it's a lot of things. My colleague, Jeannie Mao, who is the Vice President of Inclusion and Equity at CBS, and amazing. She and I work together, but I created it 18 years ago as a
Mhm.
way to offer access to people of color who did not have access. So what my role is we get about 1,500 to 2,000 applications, and they go through different levels of readers. And if they make it to the final round of readers, then I read it and Jeannie reads them. And then we decide who we're going to bring in for interviews. So I do the reading, I do the interviews. Then we pair the mentees with an executive mentor, and they write a new piece of material. I used a lot of my CBS program for the Mentorship Matters program as I was developing that. And then I get them for 16 weeks, weekly workshops where we bring in agents, managers, executives. I have two what I call cone of silence nights, which is alumni, lower level alumni and upper level alumni, talking about what it means to be a person of color if you are the only person of color or the only woman in a room. And the great thing is, I just have to tell you that this past 2 months, I had the junior level and the senior level. And the junior level people, the people who are the staff writers and the story editors, they said they were not the only person of color in the room, which was amazing because the people who were just 3 to 5 years ahead of them, they often were. And we do a mock writing room and we do many mock showrunner meetings. And I work with them on how they present themselves and how you take a meeting, how you become memorable, how you just nail that showrunner meeting, and they get lots of practice. And so I oversee all of that.
Wow. Someone was just telling me that I was one of the busiest women they know, but I don't think that that's true compared to you.
We can be
Because
busy together.
we'll be busy together. But because also you're doing the WGA showrunner training program. So what does that program look like? How, I guess what I want to know is like what kind of what exactly does it mean, training program? What are you training them to do once they're at that level?
Sure, sure. Well, let me first talk about what the eligibility is to be in the program, because
Yeah.
I get emails from people all the time. I want to be a showrunner, but hello, so do a
I
lot
heard
of
you on
people.
Right On, and you said I just had to sign up.
Yeah, just sign up to be
Yeah.
in the showrunner training program.
Yeah.
So to be eligible, you have to be a senior level writer producer on a current show. And that's like supervising producer, co-executive producer, executive producer, and or have a script, a pilot, or a series that has been set up at a network, a cable channel, or a streamer. It can't be at a studio. It has to be setup where they're going to buy it. And if it's a script that it looks like it's got a real shot of being picked up, if it's a pilot, you're waiting to hear whether or not it's going to get picked up to series. And if it's a series, that makes sense because you have a series on the air. A big part of what we think about is who's going to need this information most immediately. So
Yeah.
that is, and we get like 160 applicants because it used to be people weren't eligible, but today, because there's so many first time creators who have not been in a writer's room before, they really need this information and they're eligible to apply. Then we do interviews. We have a selection committee, an admissions committee. We decide based on their letter of interest and their application who we should bring in for an interview. So we interview about 60 people. And the truth is, I'm in every single interview and have been for the past 16 years. I've been in a
Wow.
lot of interviews, but
Wow.
I always have a colleague, a showrunner, someone from the admissions committee. Jeff Melvoin is the creator of the showrunner training program. He's a writer producer. His most recent credit is he was executive producer of Killing Eve, but
Mm.
he's been the showrunner on 8 different series.
Wow.
So he'll be in a lot of the meetings with me. I always have another person that's in the meeting. We fill out evaluation forms, interview evaluations. Then the selection admissions committee gets together and we go through and we decide who's going to be in the program. And it is hard because so many people they're so qualified and we would love to have everybody, but when the world is analog, we just can't, it can't be open-ended because the interaction of the participants with their fellow classmates is super important, and being able to interact with the speakers, because I bring in about 40 speakers over the course of the program. That's important.
Wow.
That intimacy, that is important. This year, because it was virtual, we were able to have more people than we normally would, and that was fantastic. But we really hope that next year, 2022, we'll be able to be back in person. So it's
What-
go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask if a hybrid model is something you guys are considering, in future iterations, or if you just want to go completely back to in person.
Well, it's a conversation to have. What we do have, interestingly, this year in the pandemic, we've had 2, and we're going to have 1 more showrunner training program workshops that are open to television writers in the Guild. And the first one is a crash course, which is how you go from writer to manager. And the next one we're doing is on post-production. And that's open because it's virtual.
Mhm.
It's open to we've had 150 people on them who are people who are television writers who this makes sense for them to attend. But I think that the actual sort of the flagship program will be in person, because a huge part of the benefit of the program is having your class, your cohort, getting to know them, go out for drinks afterwards, have coffee before. We start the day when it's in real time with bagels and schmooze and coffee, and everybody has a half hour to connect. Then we have lunch for 45 minutes or an hour that we bring in. We always feed our classes very, very well, so they have a chance to connect. Then afterwards, there's some classes because we're in the Writers Guild, across the street is a farmer's market. They go in, they have a place where they go and have drinks. And that kind of relationship is invaluable because those are all people who are going to be in the position of running a show. And if you have a problem, you say, look, I need to hire a DP. Who do you know? This is happening. How can you help me? That's a huge part of the program.
Yeah. And the program in itself is, can you just give us the broad strokes of what a showrunner is responsible for? What does that job
Sure.
actually look like? So this training program, the intensity makes a little more sense.
Sure, that is a great question, because it's a mystery to many,
Yeah.
many people. The showrunner has the final say. The showrunner, by the way, is always a writer. There are non-writing executive producers, but the showrunner is always a writer. They are responsible first and foremost for making sure that the scripts are great. It is their voice. They are generally the creator of the show. They are responsible for the budget, for staying within the budget. The line producer is who manages it, but the showrunner is ultimately responsible. They are responsible for casting. They have the finals. The buck stops with them. They have the final say in terms of casting, production design, wardrobe, hair, props. They are the leader of this often, 30-40 million dollar enterprise. They interact with the executives. They go to set. They hire directors. Nothing happens that the showrunner doesn't know about. They oversee post. They It's from beginning to end. They are in the writers' room. They break stories. They break the season. And then they make sure that each script fits in with the tone and the voice of the show and is the very best it can be. Some showrunners have their writers produce their episode from beginning to end. In the streaming world, that's kind of different because all the scripts are written ahead of time for the most part. So the showrunner has a huge, 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 huge job, and they are the leader of the organization. They are the manager. They're the ultimate manager of making sure things run smoothly, that they're responsible for the tone of the set, for the tone of the writer's room. It is up to them. Their demeanor, their values are what come through in terms of how a show is made.
Yeah, creating that atmosphere. And when I guess what would you say would be the stark difference of a showrunner who didn't go through your program versus a showrunner that did? Like, what do you see the biggest improvement or growth from? Like, is it about how they manage time? Is it how they make decisions? Is it how they, what is that? What's the, the thing that you really see them get boosted in within their own one role as a showrunner, or
Sure.
they have a better grasp on because of your program?
Well, maybe the easiest way to answer that is to tell you what the structure of the program is and the material that we cover. I think that will
Yeah,
help.
definitely.
So
Okay.
it's 6 Saturdays. Week 1 is going from writer to manager. And it's really the different skill set. I mean, you get the job because you've written a fantastic script, but then suddenly you're thrust into the role of a manager. So we talk about what those, and really that's the overarching theme of the whole 6 weeks, going from writer to manager. We have established and brand new showrunners that speak at the end of day 1 about their experiences, what you need to know before you start your first show. Then week 2 is managing writers, the writing process, managing inclusion in your room and on your set. And we have breakout sessions where the participants meet. So let's say there's 30 people in a class, so we break them into groups of 5, and the speakers, as I said, I bring in 40 speakers, they rotate between those groups so they can ask more in-depth questions. And that's about, how do you break a season of television? How much time do you spend on the outline? How much time do you spend on the script? How do you manage writers? How do you hire writers? How do you fire writers? How do you manage the room? What if you have problems? How do you handle that? So that's week 2. Week 3 is
Mhm.
managing production and working with directors. So we have a line producer come in and talk about what's expensive and what's not expensive when you're shooting, how you should be thinking about it, how to have a relationship with your line producer so that you're working together. And if your line producer, if she says, you know what, we're over budget by 100 grand, Then you can figure out what you need to change in the script to make that work. And we bring in a director, usually Paris Barclay, who is fabulous, who's a past president of the Directors Guild of America. And he talks about what a showrunner needs to know about working with a director to have the most effective relationship and the best outcome. And that's what the line producer does too. We really teach the class what you should know about hiring people, what you should know about how to get the most out of that relationship. Week 4 is managing executive relationships and managing actors. And that is always a big hurdle for people. So I bring in 4 wonderful executives from network, from streaming, from cable, and they talk about what they need from a showrunner in order to advocate for them, in order for the showrunner to be successful. And it's a very frank conversation, and the class gets to ask questions. Then we do the rotating the speakers situation again. And then we talk about actors and how you manage your relationships with actors. And what do you do if an actor is misbehaving? And then week 5 is all about post-production. It's everything you need to know, but you can't know here's really the truth. And then I'll come back to week 6.
Yeah.
You cannot teach somebody how to be a showrunner in 6 Saturdays, but what you can do, and Jeff always says this, it's like Lamaze. It doesn't take the place of birth, but it gives you an idea of what to expect. So week 5 is that. Week 6 is managing your career and managing the work-life balance, which is huge because the job is all consuming. And throughout, people say, this is an impossible job. This is a huge job. This is a terrible job. This is a big job. And so I always have to say, well, why would anybody do it then? And then you hear the great parts about how wonderful it is to have a group of people create something together, how satisfying it is, how wonderful it is to be the person who gets to say, yeah, that we're going to do it this way. So what we emphasize in terms of leadership is learning to delegate, time management for sure, how to be fair with people, how to treat people is huge. And how you manage relationships. It's everything, right?
What is the most common thing that your, I guess we would call them your mentees, that they bump up against? Is it leadership? Is it time management? Is it, interpersonal skills? Like, what do you think is the biggest or most common challenge to become a showrunner?
And they're not mentees. That's a CBS program. They're aspiring showrunners or it's okay. I just don't want to. I mean, this is going out to a lot of people. I don't want to miss.
You guys, Carol knows what she does for a living. Yes,
it is time management, and it is interpersonal skills, interpersonal relationship skills, because generally writers, not always, but they tend to be more introverts. They tend to be creative and focused on that, maybe a little insecure. The writers listening to this can probably relate to that.
Oh, yeah.
But to be a good manager, you have to have confidence in your decision. Being decisive is huge. The people that fail at it are people who cannot make up their minds. They are people who, for whatever reason, often their own neuroses, they cannot delegate. What we say is find people who do their job well and let them do it. And the people who just don't do it well and who often fail, and John Wells always says this, your show can fail creatively, but if you have been a good manager, you will get another shot. But if your show fails creatively and you have failed as a leader and a manager, it's going to be a long time before you can get another opportunity.
Yeah. So it's like, maybe looking through the lens of you're also, yes, you're a writer. All showrunners are writers, as you said. But if you come into it looking at it more of managing a business and a staff and, like a CEO basically of a
That's
company, each show is,
exactly.
there are a lot of
Go ahead.
things that I deal with over at Final Draft, managing my own time and being decisive. And yeah, that very much, if you look at showrunner as an actual manager, then I think that probably unveils that a little bit more.
Yeah, they are. The way we say it is you're the CEO of a $50 million enterprise. And often you've never done it before, but
Yeah.
you are responsible for 150 people's livelihood and $50 million. And so when people say, I came
Yeah.
up with a show, why can't I be the showrunner? Because who's going to give you $50 million if you've never done it before?
Yeah. Yeah, I hear that a lot.
Yes.
I had this amazing pilot and it should just get sold. Okay, cool. But who do you know? What have you done? And would you give yourself millions of dollars,
Exactly.
hoping you did well?
My friend has a great analogy. She said, okay, let's assume you need open heart surgery. Now, I've never done open heart surgery, but I have seen it on television so many times. Let me do your open heart surgery. No one's going to say yes to that.
Very, very short line. I want to talk a little bit about the topic of assistance, of support staff.
Yeah.
It's a hot topic right now. I don't want to get into all of the politics of pay and everything, but because I think a more a better topic for our podcast, for our audience, is how to get these showrunner assistant, writer's room assistant. You can also be a script coordinator. There's different types of support level, but once it's like, I guess the conundrum right now is getting that opportunity in the first place is very challenging. Many of them have been writers for years before they get that shot. And then how do you not get stuck in a role, in a support role, because you hopefully someday you want to get staffed. Maybe you want to be a showrunner, maybe you don't. That's a huge responsibility. But can we talk about that aspect of the assistant?
Sure.
Like how do you get in, and then how do you not? What's that? The program you did, Get the Fuck Unstuck. That's
Yes.
what you did. Yeah.
Yes. So getting in is tough. Getting in is really tough. It is generally knowing somebody. It is, I mean, what else is new? Welcome to Hollywood, right? But it is knowing somebody who knows a showrunner. It's knowing an assistant who is moving on and needs to hire somebody. There's the Awesome Assistants group. I think they're called Awesome Assistants, and they let each other know about opportunities on Facebook. So it's knowing somebody to get in, but you have to have the right attitude. You have to be willing to work your ass off. And there's people that went to fancy colleges that don't feel like they need to do that, and other people that didn't go to fancy colleges that don't feel like they need to do it. But the people who succeed are the people that give it 150%. My daughter, and I did not get her this job, I promise you, she did it. She went to UCLA and she met people, and she had a friend who was a showrunner's assistant who helped her get in an interview to be a writer's PA. She worked her ass off. She was on a show called Carol's Second Act, which was a sitcom at CBS. She never got one lunch order wrong. I mean, she made sure that the snacks were alphabetized. She thought what people needed ahead of time, and she made sure they had it. She was the first one in, last one out. You get the idea. She got promoted to showrunner's assistant. And if the show had gone, and those showrunners are in development, and she got that job. But so it's having a great attitude. Here's what's really true. It's like being fun to be around. That is a big thing. These are stressful situations. They want somebody with a good attitude, who doesn't take themselves too seriously, who are willing to go above and beyond. So that's how you get in. And look, there's all different kinds of showrunners. Let's say if we're talking about the showrunner's assistant, that There's showrunners that are easygoing. The ones my daughter works for, they don't need her much. Nothing personal. They don't ask her to do anything personal. They are really self-contained. There's other showrunners who are messy and they need their assistant to do everything. Now, the
Mhm.
smart ones say before they hire them, look, you're going to be doing some personal things as well as work things. And then the person can say, not that's not for me, or they can say, sure, I sign up for that. So that job is making sure that they keep their boss on track in terms of managing their time. They coordinate meetings, they take notes, they do follow up for their showrunners, they roll calls, they make sure that the right people get through and the wrong people don't get through. They can read scripts often and do, grammar typo passes on them. And that's if they're not doing the personal stuff. That's what the job is primarily.
Yeah. And that job is very easy to get stuck in. So what are some things that, and when I say stuck, I mean people that, want to staff, they want to, be a producer on the show, they want to, or maybe, jump up to showrunner, but say they've been in that position for a solid 5 years. They haven't made any forward motion. What kinds of things can they do to get the fuck unstuck?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of different things you can do. I just want to say, and this is sort of like a rock star story. My daughter's friend who got her the job on Carol's second act had started as a writer's PA, was a writer's PA on 3 different shows. Then she was the writer's assistant on Carol's second act. Then she actually was she was a showrunner assistant, then a writer's assistant. Then within 6 months, she got staffed, and she's been staffed 3 times since then. Now,
Wow.
she's a very talented writer, but so are a lot of other people. She's ambitious without being obnoxious. She networks like crazy. She helps people. She stays in touch with people. She asks people to read her scripts. The people on Carol's second act gave her material to their agents and managers, and she got signed. She's great in a meeting. So, to answer your question, it's about having genuine relationships with the people with whom you work. It's about really elevating your writing so that somebody will say, wow, it makes me look good to pass you along. It's also opportunity. You know what I mean? If you stay on one show, how many shows stay that long? And you keep getting passed over to be on staff. If you let's say you're the writer's assistant, you've been a writer's assistant for 3 seasons, nothing's going to happen there. So you need to change. You need to jump to another show. I know a writer who created Suits, Aaron Korsh. He
Mhm.
was in the support staff position for 9 years before he got on staff and then sold Suits.
Wow.
So you can toil. It it sh- it is it comes down to your material. It comes down to relationships. It comes down to hustle without being obnoxious. It comes down to making a move, even a lateral move, if you need to do that to get in with new people and have allies, create alliances with people who want to help you because you got all their lunch orders right. You know what I mean? Or
Yeah.
does
Yeah.
that answer your question? Does that make
Well,
sense?
yeah, but I also, how many of those, or would you say it's pretty common for the support staff role people to also be applying to fellowships and,
It's
trying
perfect.
to get forward that way?
I gotta tell you, we have every year at CBS, we have at least one, sometimes two. This year we had 3 showrunners assistants or assistants who come into the fellowship, and then they get
Wow.
staffed. So even if you're in a support position, you can absolutely apply to the fellowship. You gotta just make sure that if you get in, your boss or bosses say, yes, you can definitely participate.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
recommend
And
people do both of those things for sure.
right. I'm always of the 2, 3 prong approach. Like, why would I just have one iron in the fire?
Exactly. The more people you
Uh,
know, the more irons.
Absolutely, absolutely. And also, going back to fellowships and applying to them, and expanding your network and, going to the people around you, when you're doing things like writing your letter for consideration, when you're practicing for your interview. Like if you're already in a room, there's a pretty good chance a lot of those people have been, or at least one person has been through the process and can help you through that, right? I'm assuming.
You can, and also I know people who have reached out to alumni, even if they didn't know them, and say, I've got an interview. How can you help me with that?
Mhm.
Tell me what I should know. I'm meeting with Carol or meeting with Jeannie and Carol. Tell me how to help. If you can get a hold of them, that's a way to do it. And they may, in fact, be working with people who have gone through the process for sure. There is I think, and you tell me if I can mention, the Script Anatomy has a class on, they do a great class on how you write letters of interest. I
Yeah,
work
what
with
does
my
that look
clients on
like?
that.
I haven't, I myself, I've never seen a letter of interest. I'm assuming I know what all is going in there, but like for folks that don't even know what a fellowship is, what is the letter of interest that you want, that when you're trying to apply to a fellowship?
Yeah, super important. For CBS, it is a third writing sample. That's how we look at it. You have to submit
Okay.
a spec and a pilot and a letter of interest, a personal statement. It is not a college essay. It is not a formal, I am interested in applying to this position. And I've read some of those, and it's like, dude, you do not, or dudette, you do not, or they, you do not get what this is about. So
Yeah.
the way you want to write the story, and we may have talked about this before, is where you write that is you start by putting somebody in a scene of something that happened to you that makes you memorable, and then take them through sort of chronologically how you decided to become a writer, what obstacles you may have overcome, what kind of writing you like to do, what you would have to contribute to a writer's room. And make it compelling. If you're a comedy writer, make it humorous without trying to be funny, because that always backfires. But make it entertaining, make it engaging the way you would a script. And I say that you should practice, you should get as much feedback on your letter as you do on a script in terms of notes. The other
That's
thing is knowing how to present yourself well, and how you talk about yourself is really important. And on my website, here's a shameless plug, carolkirschner.com, you can get a 31-page ebook on how you talk about yourself in 60 seconds. And that is really helpful for making sure that you're staying on track with what you want to make sure that you want to say.
Yeah. Our listeners may have also heard that referred to as like personal narrative, your personal log line. So, what you're saying is it's important to learn how to be able to do that in person, of course, but also on the page as a writing sample.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The way I call it, your personal log line and your personal A story. And your personal log line is about 30 seconds long and answers the question, what do you do? Because in Hollywood,
Mhm.
everybody wants to know what you do. What they really want to know is, what can you do for me? But they ask what, and so you need to be able to answer that. And your personal A story is about a minute or a minute and a half long, and it answers the question, so tell me about yourself. And that's what you need to have down when you go into an interview. If it's for a fellowship, if it's for a writing job, if it's with a showrunner, you need to have that story down and be able to
Mm.
say it in an engaging way that doesn't sound so rehearsed, but that you hit
Yeah.
every point you want to hit.
And then that translates, let's say, you've made it through all of the rounds of early reads, and then they get through, you and Jeannie, and they get an interview. I'll link to the interview where I fucked it up for you guys so you don't have to. But can we talk a
I
little bit
remember
about
that.
that was fun. That was almost a year ago. I cannot believe it.
Was it?
Uh,
Wow.
but let's talk about that interview. Like, what are the kinds of things that they should be prepared to talk about? Is it essentially the letter, like expanding upon that, for themselves and answering questions? What does the interview look like?
Well, maybe the first way to answer that is to say what we're looking for.
Yeah.
We're looking for somebody who we feel like we can sell to agents, managers, and showrunners. We're looking for somebody, and for Jeannie and I especially, we're not just looking for staff writers. We're looking for people who we believe have the kind of personality and ability to be a showrunner. Because the television landscape is not going to change until there are many more underrepresented people that are running shows. So we're looking for somebody who is poised, and we all know everybody's nervous, right?
Yeah.
Who knows how to talk about themselves in a way that makes them sound interesting and sort of have you leaning forward. A mistake that a lot of people make is they don't make it a conversation. They don't take a breath and let us ask questions or talk. They just talk straight through.
That's me. I've had a nickname in the past at a studio I used to work at, and it was Interrupt Us. Didn't get me very far, kids. Don't interrupt.
Don't interrupt, but don't talk nonstop. Don't interrupt other people. Don't interrupt the interviewers, of course, but don't talk nonstop and not let us ask you questions. So it's like, take a breath, read the room. The way that we're going to ask you these kinds of questions. What are you watching on television? What are your favorite shows? Tell us about what you're writing. Just have a log line. Don't go into if I ask you, tell me what you're working on, just the log line. Don't go into 15 minutes of what it's about. What shows are you watching on our network or streamer? Or what do you think you'd be right for in terms of getting hired on one of the shows that we are involved in, and why? From your personal life makes you a good match for that? And what writing samples do you have that would be a good match for that? We'll ask you if you have questions. It's great. We'll ask you if you have management, if you have representation. We'll ask you if you know anybody who's been through the program. It's really a conversation to get to know you, to see if you're comfortable and to see how you present yourself. Somebody came in, and we may have talked about this before, and she was wearing flip-flops.
Yes.
Yes. No, that's not okay. Don't do that.
No.
That's a bad idea.
On any interview, people, unless it's like to teach how to surf. I don't know.
Yeah, that's right.
A place where that's cool. Wow. Yeah. So we did that interview, and there was something that it just came to me that you hit on that I want to hit on again is all of those different aspects of things that will be talked about in the interview, from your personal narrative, your A story, to the questions that will be asked, to what you're writing, to what you're watching, should all be somehow threaded together, right? In the kind of the brand of writer you are. Like if you're a comedy writer and you're citing procedural dramas, is what you're watching or what you're writing, then that, so can you talk about the cohesiveness of your conversation?
Sure. It's important to know what your lane is, because we have comedy shows, we have drama shows, we have supernatural shows, we have genre shows. We need to know, are you a comedy writer? Are you a drama writer? Are you a genre writer? That doesn't mean that you can't be writing comedy but still love Handmaid's Tale, or I May Have to Destroy You, or, or Star Trek. It's okay as long as in general you're in the same house, and you called it being, that you're on brand. It doesn't have to be absolutely strict. Everybody has things they love to watch that aren't necessarily what they're writing. But in general, if you're writing dark, gritty dramas, you should be watching some of those dark, gritty dramas, and not just, The Good Place or Mom or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that we've covered quite a bit today. We're going to have you back a couple more times because there's just so much.
Great. I would love it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. We're really aiming to just be the community and resource for all screenwriters, whether they, use Final Draft software or not, whether they enter Big Break or not. We're definitely on board with creating more of a community. So, screenwriters there's just so many blind spots that you have x-ray vision on. So we'll definitely have you back very soon. And we'll talk more about presenting yourself and what not to do out there as well. I thank you so much for your time and just, helping us build more resources for screenwriters. They all need it. We all need it. There's a lot of blind spots out there. So we appreciate
Thank you for having me, Kayla. I love doing this. I'm here anytime you need me.
Thanks to Carol Kirshner for coming on the show, and thanks to Kayla Guess for guest hosting. And as always, thanks to you, our listeners. If you liked this episode, leave us a review, and if you haven't already, subscribe on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. For news about future episodes and more, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at Final Draft Inc. and Instagram at Final Draft Screenwriting. This episode was produced by Kayla Guess with help from associate producer Emma Vranich. Music by T. Kelly. Thanks again, everyone. Until next time, write on.